You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Hello, how we doing? It is Thursday, July 25th. Nick Alberga Jay Rosehill, another summer edition of Leafs Morning Take. How we doing, Rosie?
Another grindy summer edition of Leafs Morning Take. Yeah, man, not much happening out there. Everyone's in summer mode, I'm sure. But you can pop in and check in on some Leafs action if you would like. It is an odd time to be doing these shows because I'm kind of chomping at the bit to get some action going.
We're entering the dog days of summer. I mean, let's be clear about that. I felt that way July 15th. It's now July 25th. But it really feels like the dog days of summer, and it's maybe more so because of all the activity on July 1. Remember all the money that was spent, all the deals, everything put together, that nobody had any money left to do anything else.
Seems like that's a theme lately. Like you've been kind of doing this and overseeing free agent frenzy and July 1 and all that stuff for longer than I, but it seems like that's the theme, like record-breaking numbers getting crunched out on day one, and then it just kind of being tumbleweeds after that. Would you agree?
Yeah, usually how it is. I think this year is unlike other years where usually there's a couple big names or bigger names, I should say, than the ones remaining right now. Like I think JVR is the biggest free agent left, where it's like it's dragged out and they don't end up signing till like the end of August. Like there's not much cooking. There's not many free agent names remaining that are actually going to make a difference, at least in the top six anymore. Maybe Sprong was the last one, goes to the Vancouver Canucks. But for some reason this year, it's like GMs are like, let's do all our business on July 1 or July 2nd and then just coast for the rest of summer. Because even the Maple Leafs, like they got the Dewar deal done, and we're going to talk about that coming up. That's it, man. They've got no other fish to fry in terms of contracts this summer, aside from guys they can possibly extend if they want to, like Matthew Knies and Mitch Marner and others.
Yeah, it's a little odd. I'm still looking on that Hockenpah kid.
I know.
Like, I can't believe we haven't got news on that, or there's just kind of seems like it's brushed under the carpet. Obviously, they'll have to address it at some point, but it seems odd that hasn't been anything done. But yeah, I mean, we're sitting here, we're talking about Connor Dewar right now. It tells you the level of intensity that's going on with the Leafs organization right now.
This could be the first and last time that a podcast is named specifically after Connor Dewar. But don't worry, folks. We will get into the one-year deal handed out to Connor Dewar. First and foremost, I want to get your thoughts on everything transpiring in Edmonton the last couple of days. We've had Joel Quenneville on this podcast. I exchanged texts with him yesterday. He is chomping at the bit to come back here in the NHL. But Stan Bowman is the new GM of the Edmonton Oilers. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, pretty controversial, I guess you would say, now that you see all the different people that are up in arms about it. I mean, I don't know. I've kind of been clear about my opinion on that. I think that what went down in Chicago was kind of a one-off scenario that those guys could never have dreamed they'd find themselves engaging in, and did they handle it as bad as everyone says so? I think there's a lot of false information out there about who did what. Did they handle it perfectly? I'm sure everyone could agree they could have done better. But as far as I'm concerned, like, I don't think you need a lifetime sentence for making a mistake on something you're not very well suited to deal with. I think that their careers and livelihoods and everything about them has suffered because of it. And I'm okay with him becoming active in the NHL again. I was with Quenneville, same with Bowman. I mean, they've said their pieces and realized, they could have done better, and everyone has their opinions, feels strongly about it to a degree. That's fine. But as far as people being so up in arms that this guy should never work a day again, I'm just not that kind of a person that wants to just cancel and delete someone and give them a life sentence for maybe making a mistake or not having the tools to handle a situation properly.
I believe in second opportunities first and foremost, but I think you hit the nail on the head with your breakdown. I think the more intriguing part for me is like Stan Bowman was among other big names out there in terms of potential fits for general manager, and they picked him. Like, I think there's obviously the glitz and the glamour winning wise attached to a Stan Bowman, but let's not forget who was the big architect in Chicago. I mean, it was Dale Talon. And I think you look at the body of work of Stan Bowman, I think that's also the reason why Oilers fans are up in arms, is because they got a guy who I think is quite simply potentially overrated.
That is a kicker. I mean, if you take the Kyle Beach stuff away from it, some people would be like, even that aside, like if you don't have a personal opinion on that specific incident, then they still would say why him anyways, just based on the pure hockey stuff. And people will go down into some trades that he's made that are kind of world class busts, and people are saying he gets a lot of credit for what happened in Chicago, and it wasn't really him that put that together. That's all fine and dandy. I mean, anyone can have your opinion on it. I guess he is a Bowman, and that has some clout to it. And yes, he's got a bunch of rings and he's got experience. There's no doubt. So they leaned on him they leaned towards him for those reasons. But it will be interesting to see, what they left on the table and how he'll be able to, construct or reconstruct that roster and keep it where it is and try to keep getting better and get them over that hump. I mean, they're one shot away from winning the Stanley Cup here this year. Obviously, they got a good footing, but we'll see what he does in there. But I do know I noticed there was more backlash than I guess I thought there would be with a signing of a guy like Bowman.
Man, the kicker for me is like the roster and the team that he takes over. Like they've done all their moves. Jeff Jackson was very, very proactive. He brought back Adam Henrique. He brought back Janmark. He brought in guys like Victor Arvidsson, re-signs Connor Brown. Jeff Skinner's in the fold. Like they're a really, really deep team. And for everything we just said about Dale Talon being the architect in Chicago, it seems to be happening again. Like there is a pathway where the Oilers go win a Stanley Cup next June, and the GM's going to be Stan Bowman, obviously.
I know. That would be a nice place to be. I don't imagine that would be something that a GM in the league would be crying about, adopting a team like the Oilers right now. Keep in mind they had a lot of magic going on in the playoffs. They had some ups and downs in the seasons. I mean, I wouldn't put my money on them to walk to the Stanley Cup final next year. I think a lot of things have to go right. You remember how bad they were at the beginning of the year. You can go on these slides. Skinner was capable of going on huge slides. A lot of the eggs are in the McDavid basket and Draisaitl basket. Obviously, their defensemen have always been a heel of theirs that wasn't in the playoffs. Like all great things that they have corrected and fixed and went on a fantastic run. And hats off to them. I'm just saying you can't guarantee that that's going to happen again this year. And I don't know, with Bowman, as far as what they have and what they're going to need to do, he's going to do his best to try to keep this thing together and keep the talent and the chemistry together and make the moves that are necessary to keep them at the top of the league. But yeah, obviously there are jobs that you could inherit that are a lot more difficult out of the gate than this one for Stan Bowman.
I would say the betting favorite is always tricky, right? Because I think you look at that Oilers roster, but I think you hit the nail on the head once again, where it's like it is difficult, regardless if you win or lose, to get back to a cup final. On top of that, we just saw it happen with Florida, like exactly what happened. They lost to Vegas and they found a way to get all the way back to the cup final. But you look at that Western Conference, a lot of much improved teams, a lot of teams really knocking on the door to win another cup. It's going to be difficult. Now, naturally, I want to compare that Edmonton team to Toronto. How far off do you think the Maple Leafs are from the betting favorite that is the Edmonton Oilers? Like, I honestly feel like it's been a while since I've looked at the Maple Leafs as a perennial contender. Do I think they are right now? No. Do I think they've improved since the season ended? Yes. But in terms of like comparing them, where do you see the Maple Leafs when you look at Edmonton?
Well, I've always compared and found similarities between the Oilers and the Leafs, just the way they're constructed, the way their fans are quite passionate, but haven't had anything to get too excited about in a long time, haven't had a cup win in a long time. Obviously, a lot more to be excited about this spring with the Oilers making that run. So they've had that taste of success recently, obviously, but just they have a lot of eggs in their forward baskets. They have goaltending questions or people saying they don't have enough to do it, and people are saying they have too much money tied up in a handful of guys and not enough to go around to make a solid core of defensemen that can get you to the Stanley Cup final. Blah blah blah. They have a lot of the similarities. Lo and behold, Edmonton goes up and gets to Game 7 of the finals. Pretty impressive. So it can be done, obviously, and I don't think a lot of people picked them right out of the bat to say, oh, they're going to go win the cup, just because no one knew Skinner could play like that. He proved that wrong. No one knew those D could shut down the way they did, and they proved that. And obviously, you got guys like Draisaitl and Connor McDavid playing at their best at a lot of different portions of the playoffs. Goes a long way. So, I mean, you're going to need Joseph Woll to be better than Skinner, as good as Skinner in the playoffs. This D core, which I think we've totally bumped up here with some of the additions that they've gotten, could be like the disruptive decor that can just be solid, be physical, be defensive, chip it in, get on the power play. You got some guys that can work it around there as well. And you just need Austin Matthews to be Austin Matthews. You need Mitch Marner to be an assassin in the playoffs. You need Willie Nylander to just go on the hottest streak of his life at the right time. And they could get there as well. But those things need to fall in place like they did for the Oilers. But now that the Oilers have done it, it makes you look and say, if you're talking to some dickhead that hates the Leafs and you're going to say, they have a chance to get, to the Eastern Conference Finals or to the finals this year, and they could laugh in your face. It'd be like, well, why though? Like, there's no reason to say they couldn't. Those things can happen. You've got a goaltender that's capable of playing really good. You got a decor that's capable of being really good. You got forwards that are capable of being lights out. So, I mean, it all just has to happen, right? The pieces are there. It could happen. It hasn't yet, frustratingly so, to a degree where it's laughable, where the same damn problems come into play that are unexcusable every single spring. But it could happen this spring. Like, we just don't know. And no one expected the Oilers, like I said, to go on that magical run. They didn't think they had the pieces. Lo and behold, they did. The same thing could happen to the Leafs this year.
Bottom line for me, you have the star power to push through in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think in many respects, as you mentioned, you look at the Oilers, everything came together at the right time. And who's to say they don't win the Stanley Cup if Leon Draisaitl's not at 25% or 40% or whatever he was? Like, McDavid played like a man possessed. He was right for that Conn Smythe trophy. But then conversely, you look at the Leafs, there are plenty of players, namely Austin Matthews and, maybe Mitch Marner, maybe Willie Nylander, who are fully capable of taking over a series, taking over a few games in a series at the very least. And I think if you get all those guys going at the same time, they could be a very scary team. You couple that clearly with the goaltending. You mentioned Woll, you mentioned, Stolars. I think when you look at the back end between the two franchises, obviously the guy that sticks out for them is Evan Bouchard and Mattias Ekholm. But I think the Maple Leafs are very, very underrated going into the regular season here on the back end. I think they made improvements. I think Tanev's really, really going to help a guy like Morgan Rielly maybe take that next step or be the guy we've seen in the past and more of an all-around defenseman. But what gets me is the depth up front. I think you look at the bottom six of the Oilers compared to the Maple Leafs. I think it's night and day, and we've been talking about this a lot throughout the offseason. It's a work in progress. You don't have to finish the job, so to speak, right now or address the situation right now when it comes to that bottom six, but they're lacking some major league depth, man. That's all I can say.
No, I know. And when we, I think it was last week or something, we did the, the comparisons and the side by sides of the back end and the forwards, and you look and it just looks like it looks like Swiss cheese, when you look at, some of the question marks, some of the guys that are the only ones that could fill certain spots. And you're like, that's not really, we were hoping to make a bigger splash this offseason. Thought we had some cap room to maybe kind of plug a few holes there, and it doesn't look like they have. And we've talked about how that's an opportunity for like the Nick Robertsons of the world to go in and steal a job. But I don't think that's where you want to be when you're thinking about contending for the Stanley Cup, and that's your goal, right? I don't think they mind being underdogs. I don't think they mind not being on people's radar or not being highly touted. They can just go about their business, which is difficult to do in Toronto, and just hopefully, start to open people's eyes as the season goes on. But again, they have been consistently a team of two seasons. They have their regular season and they have the playoffs, and they seem to get, their arses top pucker up in the playoffs. Their big boys don't seem to be able to stand out and say, I am a dominant player in this series. I am the best player in this game. And they just kind of are always struggling to find it. But that's not to say that it couldn't happen this year. You find some chem, the D's better, you get a goalie that's playing solid, and all of a sudden Austin Matthews and Nylander are not, going to be held down again. They just break through. Maybe it happens with Mitch Marner. I had my qualms about the way he goes about his business in the playoffs and how he attempts to win a hockey game. And to me, it's a lost cause because nobody can do that in the playoffs, which is that's why I have these question marks about Mitch Marner saying, yeah, he's great and everything, but just his mindset going into the playoffs and how he goes about his business and how he drives the net or doesn't drive the net, how he enters the zone or doesn't enter the zone is just like, how does he expect this to work? So I had my reservations. He's going to have to do a total overhaul of his thinking in the playoffs and how that works in order to have success, if you ask me. But he's got the tools and the people around him, and who knows, you get hot and you figure it out. It could be anybody's year. We got to wait and see. But yeah, when you tell someone who doesn't like the Leafs very much that this is their year, they're going to laugh in your face. But they have to go prove it. They have to go prove that they're different, that they've got what it takes. And until they do that, there's going to be a lot of naysayers, man.
Sure is. And tell you what, somebody who's seen a lot in his time as an executive with the Maple Leafs, Cliff Fletcher. Did you see this? According to Lance Hornby of Post Media, Cliff Fletcher has renewed his contract with the Leafs for another year as a senior advisor. He's 88, Rosie, and this will be the 24th season holding an executive role with the Maple Leafs. Pretty crazy stuff.
It is good for him, man. He's kind of just a figurehead in so many ways. When he's walking around that building, he comes through the dressing room on game days, and he's kind of got the same looking suit on, and he's cruising through, and you say hi and give him the respect that he deserves and everything. And obviously he's kind of a staple in the office. And I think that what he does is he had every game and everything at his age. No, but I think he's watching a lot, and they'll ask his advice on something, and whether he's just on the payroll or what the deal is or how much he decides on this team or anything. People could argue, and that's fine, but obviously they want him around. He's kind of a figurehead, and it's nice to be able to have a guy like that you say he's a familiar face.
The legacy jobs intrigue me, man. Like, I always wonder day-to-day operation, how much do they get paid? Like, for example, what does Shane Doan do on a daily basis for the Maple Leafs? Because the Leafs, and I know other teams are guilty of it too, but they have like 72,000 people working in their front office. What are their day-to-day operations? Who are they reporting to, and how much money do they make is my question all the time.
Yeah, me too. And with Fletcher, I think it's kind of like, there's an unspoken, or maybe it is spoken, kind of you know what, you've been around here long enough, you're kind of got a job for life. We're gonna, I don't know if they throw 150 grand at him or more. I have no idea, but it's a paycheck, and it comes every 2 weeks, and it's got the Leafs logo on the top, and yeah, that's just what it is. And how long that
Yeah.
goes on, and who decides if or when that stops, or does it ever stop? Or, I mean, he's going to be 90 something. Is he going to, who knows? But there are roles like that. And when you talk about how much money MLSE has, and you're respecting or, honoring someone who's been there a long time by having one of those cushy jobs, I don't mind it. It's better than just, punting a guy out the door the second you don't need him. I would rather have it this way than that way.
All I could say is hopefully we're with the Nation Network long enough, 50, 60 years, who knows, and we have that legacy job waiting for us at the end of the tunnel, man. That would be tremendous stuff. At the Leafs Nation 401 here on YouTube. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Also, don't forget to check out Greta Bar on King Street West, 590 King Street West. Weekly specials, live sports, over 60-plus arcade games. Let the games begin. Go big. Go to Greta Bar YYZ. So I guess, big piece of news on today's podcast, the Leafs re-signing Connor Dewar to a 1-year deal worth $1.18 million. 25-year-old will be in the mix for a bottom 6 role, I think, in training camp. And, of course, the Leafs acquired him from Minnesota last year's trade deadline. I actually think he's a guy who's underrated. I'm always careful because I think there is a bit of a transition process when a guy gets traded at the deadline. And I actually look at Dewar and I look at Craig Berube, and I think there's a natural fit there. I think Dewar is going to give more than people expect this season.
Well, that could happen. That could be good. I don't have a reason to say, oh, here's why. Blah. Like, here, I don't have any concrete evidence to say anything about Connor Dewar. He's kind of one of those filler guys that does everything pretty good and doesn't do anything great. But you need guys like that make the $1.18 million that can play in the NHL, that have experience. And if you can get that guy to fit his stride, or like you said, have chemistry with a coach, or really get what's being preached, and get a little bit better every day, and all of a sudden he's a guy that could be locked into the lineup, and a guy that you rely on at certain points in the game to whatever it is, get some energy, get a bump up shift going, or respond to a goal that we just got scored on, or put him out there after we score to make sure we don't have that lackadaisical response to a goal. Whatever it is, certain things that don't really get the highlights are something that he could do, and chip in here and there, play physical, adapt the system, work your absolute bag off, and that's going to be something he needs to do to get that lineup. But the sky's the limit for anyone, man. There's opportunity in this lineup in the forward position for all these guys.
Yeah, at that price tag, once again, I'm okay with it. I think he was projecting to make a bit more, so you can call it what it is. Obviously, the salary cap going up, but I think the big thing I'm looking for, especially if he projects to play on the fourth line, man, is reliability. Like I think in the Sheldon Keefe era, really didn't know what I was gonna get from the fourth line on a nightly basis. So I think if a guy like Connor Dewar specifically, if you want to win the heart and the respect and everything from Craig Berube and the coaching staff, be reliable, PK defensively, maybe get some offensive opportunities. But I think in that type of role, your defense first. No.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, along those half walls, that's got to be your bread and butter. You can't be turning it over in that league. You can't be, losing possession of the puck. You got to have it. You got to be able to be trusted with it. You got to be able to get it in the important positions. And like I said, depending on what just happened and what's transpiring in the game, what they need, you might need to get it deep. You might need to go bang. You might need to cycle it. You might need some ozone time. You might need to, do some of those little things that, like I said, don't get you on the highlight reel. But if you have a guy or a line that does that very well, and you can put them out there at the last 2 minutes of a period, that type of thing, and you know that you can trust them, I think that is huge. And Chief's big on that stuff. You get his trust, and he knows he can rely on you to do things a certain way, the way that he preaches them. Then you'll get your ice time, and you got to show him that I'm on board, I'm listening, I get where you're going, and I'm understanding of this. And you can win a lot of trust that way, and you can get more minutes, and you can become, more of a staple, and then you can create a line that's valuable, that's used more often than not.
Don't sleep on Connor Dewar. That's all we're saying here on the podcast. Where does Pontus Holmberg fit in this conversation? Because we talked about this last week. There's a bunch of different guys, I would say, rammed into the bottom six. I would even throw Nick Robertson, at least right now, into the conversation, who undoubtedly, Rosie, are going to be fighting for a job. But like Pontus Holmberg is a guy yet to find that consistency, I think, at the NHL level. He's had moments. He's had strings of games where, like, man, this guy's making a difference. He's scoring a big goal. He's been strong defensively. But I still think he's a guy like in transition, trying to find it full time in the NHL. But I think he's going to be another bubble guy for Craig Berube.
Yeah, and I mean, it sucks talking about, these guys right now. I wish there were bigger splashes made, and bigger names, and, guys that are more etched in stone as far as what they do, what they bring, what they're capable of, what they're going to provide to the Toronto Maple Leafs this year. And we're kind of talking about, Dewar and Holmberg and Robertson in the bottom six, which isn't kind of where we're hoping we'd be. So that's kind of disappointing. But for it being what it is, I mean, yeah, he's a 25-year-old Swedish guy. He's got the upside, like you say. He's capable of doing that thing and making that play and having that big, holy, who was that? Look at him, he's going tonight. It's just a matter of consistency. Like, can you get to a level that you can stay at and that you can be counted on to be that guy? Because that's what you need. You can't just have that 3 times a year. He kind of had a hot end of the week and was really good for those 2 or 3 games. That's great, but that's not really something you can hang your hat on. And I'm sure he's looking at the situation at forward and saying there is opportunity here. And I'm sure he's looking not only to grab one of those bottom 6 spots, but push for a top 6 and show that he can be, a true player that's going to stay in the league and can be a contributing factor every night, and then just gets better and better and adopts a system. And again, like we talked about, gains Chiefs trust and everything else like that. So sky's the limit for him as well. But, again, we're not talking about world beaters here, so you can't expect them to become that just because you want them to. But yeah, all these guys are kind of licking their lips at some opportunity in front of them.
Yeah, truthfully, I don't see an opportunity for Holmberg in the top 6. I think he's better served for the bottom 6. I think Dr. Firewater makes a good point in the chat. He was quite the pest in resistance to Brad Marchand in that Bruins series, which was great to see. Holmberg played some excellent hockey. That's why I bring up his name. It's like you see moments like that, and you see how consistent he was for the most part in that series, and you wonder, what can he do over an 82-game slate? So him specifically, I'm looking at to maybe take that next step with Craig Berube. I think in a perfect world too, like David Kampf, I don't know how long he's going to be a Maple Leaf for, but in a perfect world, I'd rather Holmberg than Kampf, specifically because of the price tag, right? I think he makes obviously less than a David Kampf, and I still think he could probably bring more to the table than David Kampf. So That's the other thing too with Holmberg is like, what position do you put him at? Third line, fourth line? Is he a winger? Is he a center? I think the Leafs lack some serious depth up the middle right now, goes without saying. If they can find somebody to grab the reins at 3C, whether it's Minton, whether they go back to the Max Domi experiment, although I've mentioned time and time again, I like him and I prefer him more on the wing. Is it a Holmberg that can step into that role? I think profoundly we can say at this point in time, it's not going to be David Kempf. He is a fourth line center making 2.5 sheets a year. So I think with Holmberg, there is definitely, as you mentioned, opportunity in the bottom six. Now it's time to carve out your spot with this team and be a mainstay on that roster if you're him.
Yeah, and that's what they'd be looking for, right? I mean, Craig Berube is going to look at all these guys and figure out where they sit and where they work best according to his system and what his plans are. And, it would be nice to have a guy of Holmberg's ilk, say on the fourth line. It's like, that's where you start to get depth. Guys that maybe aren't normally on the fourth line, but they're like, I get it. I can carve out, a home here. It's not like you're not making any money if you become this mainstay guy. You're killing penalties. You can get the pest thing going in the playoffs and be banging and crashing a little bit, stand up for your teammates, stand tall in front of your net, when there's little scrums and whatnot, and just do all those little things that would make a good fourth liner. It would be nice to have that in spades. And I know that Craig Berube would appreciate that and would like that day in and day out. So yeah, there's room for this guy to come in and say, I'm better than this guy. I'm deserving of this role, and I can play it to a T. And he probably wants to be on the third line, or he probably wants to be you know what I mean? It might not be what he necessarily dreamt of, but if you can get some serious minutes and get some games and chip away at some points and get a good plus minus and, have the reputation of having all the other things covered defensively and smart wise and positionally, then yeah, he could definitely take a step forward this year.
All in all, I'm looking forward to seeing all the additions in action. It's the same way every offseason. You make all these moves around July 1, then you have to wait and wait and wait for training camp. Then you have to wait even more for opening night, which, as we know, is October 9th in Montreal, 76 days away. But Oliver Ekman-Larsson recently spoke on his decision to join the Maple Leafs with Craig Morgan, who does fantastic work out in Arizona. He pretty much alluded to the fact that he trusted his gut and his feeling. I don't know if you recall, we had this conversation, Rosie, last summer when he was bought out by the Vancouver Canucks. And right away I said that was there was familiarity with Brad Treliving. And it's sort of funny, 12 months later, ends up as a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But him specifically, I'm looking forward to seeing. I just think, as I wrote in the LeafsNation.com earlier this week, I think deployment's going to be a big word I'm using. I want him slotted in the right role, which means the 5-6 pairing with the opportunity to move up if he plays accordingly. I thought he was great, specifically in the Stanley Cup final. That was as physical as I've seen Oliver Ekman-Larsson play. And I think in a perfect world, I want him to run the first power play and take a bit off the shoulders of like a Morgan Rielly, who's been pretty much carrying everything on the blue line. So I think there's opportunity at the very least for an Ekman-Larsson, but I'm very excited to see what he brings to the table here.
Yeah, me too. I think that he's a very experienced player. He's of high quality. And I think that, people are saying, oh, he's too old. We're not asking him to go in there and win the Norris, but the things that he can do and that he shows he's capable of doing still are exactly what the Leafs are needing. I think he's going to be a total upgrade. I think they're going to really use him in a way that helps out everybody else. And like you said, takes the pressure off Morgan Rielly and stuff. It just seemed like it was too thin and too weak beforehand. And now it looks like it's got some stable, foundation under it with some of those additions. And I think it's going to be a nice look on the back end this year. I think for the first time in a long time, there's reason to be excited about the Leafs defenseman.
Rosie, I got some big news for you, buddy.
Hit me.
Your boy Will Farmer is back in the chat. You ready for this?
Oh, yeah, what's he saying? What's Willie Boy saying? Let's go.
He said, oh, wow, my dear friend Rosie, finally, here we go. Expert analysis. Let's go, Rosie. So give it to him. Will Farmer back in the mix today after a 2-month hiatus here. How does Mitchie go up front? Will Farmer writing that in.
How does Mitchie go up front?
Yeah, that was his question.
It's a wicked question, Will, and we're glad you asked it and brought her here, because what would we do without you, Will? I just don't understand these guys who like literally I can't imagine not liking a person or not liking a show and then going and like watching it and then going into the comments and getting involved as he does. It's kind of a sad life. I don't know if he's serious or not, but it's hard to take him serious. Maybe if you have a real question that you could regurgitate out of your mouth, it would be helpful for the show and the fans alike.
Will Farmer, here we go. Insults. I feel you, man. I wonder the same thing. If people have things they say about this podcast, I don't know why they're watching the podcast. As I told you, I took a lot of shrapnel the other day. Supposedly, I cut off Ben Danford, but I mentioned time and time again on the show and also in the comment section, we had some technical difficulties. I did text with Ben after to affirm that. But yeah, it's the joys of social media. But Will's going off here. He says he loves the show. Come on, Rosie. So, hey, this is one of those, like, I love the show type guys. So that's
well, maybe you're reading it back because it sounds like he's just hacking on me 24/7 and has no respect for the show or us as hosts. But if that's not the case, hey, welcome, Will. I don't know what the deal is. I'm not watching the chat right now, so I don't know exactly what's going on. But hasn't he just gone off before, Mr. Will Farmer?
Yeah, this guy's chirping. He said, "Come on, Rosie, you have to be better than that." But yeah, again, we attract these type of pigeons, I would call them, to the podcast. We welcome everybody. Hey, as long as you're here, it doesn't matter. I love the people who come to the chat and say these guys suck. Why is everybody talking about them? Why is everybody trusting their opinion? If you're here, then you're here. That's all we care about.
No. Opinions, like, I always laugh at people that say, like, oh, your career wasn't good enough to have an opinion. It's like, well, then who can have, like, where's the cutoff line for having an opinion? Do you have to be, do you have to make it to the All-Star game in the NHL in order to analyze hockey? Is that the prerequisite? Then just say that that's what you think it should be. It's not going to happen. It doesn't make sense. It would be ridiculous. But I just always laugh at, like, well, then what's the prerequisite on having an opinion on hockey? If I made it to the NHL and I played 13 years pro and I've been submersed in the game my entire life, I can't have an opinion because it's not worth anything. Well, then what's the prerequisite, man? I don't get that. You're not going to get a panel of only NHL Hall of Famers to break down hockey for the rest of eternity. So why would you be mad when a guy like me goes and just gives an opinion? I've never said I'm the smartest guy in the world. I've never said I'm always right. I never said everyone else is an idiot. I just say, based on what I know, my experience, this is what I feel on the situation. And I don't know, some people can't handle that, but that's life, baby.
Don't worry, bud. I got your back as your co-host on this podcast. He's Mr. Backtrack, by the way, is Will Farmer. Will, we remember you from a couple months ago, but saying, actually, I like Rosie. He is a good guy. So Will's that guy. Will is that guy when you call him out, Mr. Backtracker. Ever happened to you at a bar back in the day, man? You go out and, somebody who talks shit to you, and then all of a sudden, like, you say something back. Like, no, I didn't mean that. Like, they sort of backtrack. That's what Will's doing right now.
Oh, no. Not really at the bars, but on this thing, like on comment sections or something like that with like hockey fans, someone will rip me like down to the studs. And then I'll just like politely respond with like, what's the problem? Where did we lose you? And what's that all about? And they're just like, hey, just kidding, man. Hey, it wasn't really. And I'm like, whoa, like this guy's like tearing me down to like my core. And then you respond and they're like, oh shit, sorry, dude. It's like they're surprised you reacted. But I don't know. Usually I don't sling too much mud online or whatever. And unless I get a little heated, I'll give my opinion hard. But I'm open for everyone doing what you want. It's all good. I can handle it.
We're all friends. Kumbaya here. It's a campfire. Shout out to our friend David Alter. Keep up the good work, guys. We love you, David, doing some great work over at the Hockey News. So make sure you check him out. Since Will did ask a question, because I know Dr. Firewater did bring it up in the chat, he was asking about where Mitch fits up front. Who would you play Mitch Marner with next season? He's coming back, Rosie. So where would you put him? Is he back with Matthews?
Yeah, it's tough to say. They've had some chemistry before. Domi's had chemistry with Matthews. Knies, been good at, chasing that puck down, getting it to those guys. I don't know and I don't care. I hope that they mix it up a little bit to start, figure out what looks the best according to Craig Berube, and then just frickin' stick with it, right? And I don't care if Mitch is playing with Austin or not, or if he's on the second line and Tavares in there with who's playing with Nylander, like whatever the chem is, figure out a line that makes sense and then stick with it and allow them to have a season of growth and familiarity together, because I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that we did not appreciate the fact that the lines were in a blender every single night. You could literally barely get through a period with the same lines under Sheldon Keefe. And I just don't see a benefit to that. I didn't like that. I don't think Berube will be as much that way. And where Mitch Marner falls in the mix, I don't really care, but I would like to see some familiarity for these guys to be able to get a footing with some line mates and get some chemistry going and have an identity and grow into it, because they've never really had a chance to do that, because it's always just a ping pong ball of jumbling the lines every single night.
Yeah, I hope that changes first and foremost under Craig Berube, but it's kind of cool when you think about it. Berube coming in, like, he has his own ideologies, he has his own thoughts, his own perception. Like, I'm curious to see what he does line wise. Like, as we've mentioned time and time again, when the Blues won the Cup, they had so much depth, granted, but there was guys on the fourth line who started in the playoffs on the first line. But I think, to answer the question, putting Marner with Matthews makes a lot of sense. I would probably start Domi on that line on the wing. I think Matthew Knies is better suited for a middle six role. Like, I think on a cup winning team, Matthew Knies is a guy who elevates when need be, but is on the third line as a checker. Like, I think that's a perfect role for him. But I think there's going to be a lot of moving parts. Like, you lose Tyler Bertuzzi and you don't really replace that. Although that leads me to the biggest question mark going into training camp is Easton Cowan. Like, if Easton Cowan can crack this roster and show that he can be a full-time NHLer, man, it's just a different looking roster on that left side, man. When you throw Domi into the equation, you throw Knies out there, and potentially Easton Cowan.
I know. Like I said, it looks like there's a lot of holes there, and like, whoa. And yeah, you get an Easton Cowan on there. If he's, can make a difference in this league and make that jump. God, it's a big jump. You're playing with like 16-year-olds, and the next year you're literally in the National Hockey League every single night. It's a massive jump. Players can do it and have done it before. I don't love the idea of saying, oh, we're going to be fine. This 18-year-old is coming in to save the day. It's like, Jesus, guys, like that in this market, that's a huge no-no in a lot of ways. Like, you don't put that on a kid and ruin him. You could waste 2 years of him like losing it and trying to figure out what he is and who he is and how he's going to become that. And all the while the league's just going wham, 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 wham every single night in his face. Very difficult, but he does seem to be special. He has made massive strides already. Has he outgrown the OHL? You could argue that he has. And it's going to be up to him. I don't know him personally. We've had him on the show and whatnot and talk to these kids, and you get a sense of who's got their head on their shoulders. And all these guys that they've drafted recently do seem to have that. But we'll see if he can come into camp, how he adjusts to the preseason, and then to start off, if it's just going to be a question of, is he better suited going home, or is he better suited staying here? And there's going to be a little of that, we kind of need him too. So there'll be reason to kind of hope. I think he's ready. There'll be some of that going on, I think, because like you say, it looks a little lean. And when you plug his name in right there, and if he can be effective, all of a sudden it definitely helps out with this forward issue that we seem to have right now.
No need to rush him either. Like, I think if you start the season and Cowan has a strong training camp, he makes the team. You give him the allotment of games before his contract would burn a year. You can still keep him afterwards. And if you determine before the World Junior that it's just not working, he's got to go back for more seasoning. He can play on the World J team. It would make a lot of sense. I think the Leafs are in a pretty good scenario and situation here where I think they're going to give a guy like Cowan, and looking at this roster, they're going to give him every opportunity to make this team. And that's all you can ask for. That's all you can really ask for.
Totally. He's in a good spot, and they haven't signed everyone and their dog in the July 1 and throughout July, so it's not like he's going, well, where the hell am I going to fit in on this roster? There is opportunity for him to take it, but again, I think the hesitation will be like, let's really make sure that this guy's ready and not throw him in just because we really need a guy with some pizzazz who could fill a hole for us. And I think they'll be smart with that. And like you said, there's ways to kind of introduce him and get his feet wet and see how he does. And you can kind of test the waters quite a bit before you have to make a big decision. And who knows, man? He might go friggin' lighting it up in the preseason. They were looking like they were chomping at the bit. They had all the jam, all the juice, everything we want from all the other players. They had it. If he comes like that and he's gotten that much better, like it seems he did this past year, and he comes in with the same attitude in camp and just is absolutely leading the charge, I think it'll be really hard for them to say, no, sorry, you're not ready.
Shout out to our guy Alan Mock, who is watching on Facebook in the chat, asking about how we feel about the goaltending, Rosie. So you got Joseph Wall, you got Anthony Stolars, Matt Murray is the insurance piece number 3. I actually feel okay. I feel better than I did a couple weeks ago. Do I think this team still needs a bona fide stud? Yes, but all the returns, everybody, all the goalie gurus are thumbs up on Stolars. I think I always have to be careful when you look at Florida. They won the cup for a reason. They're a stingy defensive team. He played behind Sergei Bobrovsky. Obviously, that team lost some pieces. I think Stolars is a regression candidate, but I also like the fact that he's played in a market like Philadelphia. So it's not like he's jumping in the fire of a market like Toronto either. I feel okay. Okay is probably the best word to describe how I feel about the goaltending.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a Vezina winner in net. We're just not going to. That's just the way it is. Not everybody does, but I think that the capabilities of both goaltenders are very high. I think Wool could really be a special goalie. I don't want to pump him too much. I don't want everyone to have those expectations and to be part of that problem, but I do think with his poise and positionality, and he's got a really good mind, I think, for the goaltender position. I think the sky's the limit for him. He could be really, really, really good. And if he does get hurt or, goalies don't play 75 games anymore, you're going to get Stoli in there. I played with Stoli for a couple of years. I know him. He's a great dressing room guy. He's huge human being. He works hard. He's got a good mind for not getting too up and down. I think that when he needs to spell off Woolsey, he can do the job. He's fully capable, no question. And he's got all kinds of experience behind him. He's not like he's played 800 games as a goaltender, but he's been in and around the league for a long time. Just saw what it's like to have a team come together and win a Stanley Cup. So, I mean, it's a good pickup, and I think he can kind of yin and yang with Woolsey quite well. So I'm not freaking out by any means. I don't know how it's going to go. Any disaster could hit, or they could hit their stride and go on this hot run. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, obviously, but the potential's there for them to do just fine and it not even to be on the radar as far as problems are concerned.
Come to think of it, Anthony Stolars would be a really, really good guest on this podcast.
Weird.
Never know what could transpire here on Leafs Morning Take as we roll on to the last call. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'm going to set an over-under for you, Rosie, as you continue to laugh. We can't disclose guests on this podcast. You just never know what's happening on the next couple podcasts. But the line for Matthew Knies goals, let's discuss that. I'm setting the number.
Rando. I like it.
Pardon me?
I like it. What a random bet. Let's hear it.
Well, we were talking about Knies earlier on, and I'm really, really searching for content when it comes to these betting segments. I don't know how often we could talk about the Leafs winning the Atlantic Division or winning the Stanley Cup. So,
hey, I said I like it.
Thank you. So let's talk about Knies. The number I'm going to set, I believe he had 15 goals here in his rookie season. The number I'm setting is 22.5 goals. Are you taking the over or the under?
I'm thinking as you're talking, I'm going to say, I think he'll jump to 22 reps. Okay. If you go 22.5, then I'll take the over. Nice guy. He's my guy. If I had to make a Leafs jersey and go to a game or something, boom, it would be a nice jersey. 100%. He's my guy. So I'm going to go the over on that one, but I think he's going to be right around there. That's a juicy number. I think he's going to step it up. He's got potential. If he stays healthy, he could be a 30-goal scorer at some point in time in his career if he wanted. Whether it happens this year or not, I don't know, but I'll take the over 22.5.
Yeah, I'm going with the over as well. I guess I'm a hockey handicapper now, but my projection is I think this guy flirts with at least 25, if not 30 goals this season. I think Matthew Knies, the sky is clearly the limit, but he's got his footing in the league. Let's not forget he came from college hockey, hadn't really played a long, elongated slate. I thought he was great in the playoffs to play 82 games to get that under him. We've seen him in big moments. He seems just like a clutch guy. Like, I know it's a long time removed, but that Boston series, he had some moments, some games where you're like, crap, how old is this kid? Like, let's check his ID. But I think goal scoring wise, there's a lot of untapped potential. And I think you look specifically on how the top 6 looks on the wing right now. I think there's opportunity. And so, yeah, I would go over 22.5 as well on Knies, Rosie.
Yeah, man, I agree. I think Craig Berube is really going to like this guy. He's going to come in. he's just, you can tell he's just one of those college guys who like is just super focused on what he's supposed to do and doesn't have these illusions of grandeur of taking Austin Matthews' job or being that number one guy or anything. He knows what he is, and he's good at it. He works his bag off. He gets that big body down low. He's like a power forward. He can bang and crash a little bit. He's got confidence. He works hard. He can finish. He's got that, that ability to, like you say, score the big one and be there in the big moment and not grip your stick too tight. He can play with anybody. And I really think that Craig Berube is going to like this kid a lot. I can't say enough about him. He's got next to no experience and has done a lot with it. And I just think the sky's the limit for him. He could easily be a 25-goal scorer this year. And the way he plays, I just think Craig Berube is going to be a big Knies fan as well.
Could not agree more. Before we wrap, Donnie Does Dishes asked a really good question in the chat, and this is my fault as the producer or one of the producers of this podcast. How I didn't think of asking you about the whole Canadian drone situation with Team Canada's women's soccer team. Do you see that shit?
No, what is it?
Dude, this is a massive scandal as the Olympics are set to begin, but Canada got booked for flying a drone over New Zealand's practice. I think they're like the 26th ranked team in the country, and they got booked for this. They sent a couple coaches home. The coach of the team can't coach against New Zealand. Like, it's funny because they did this against New Zealand and not like, the number one ranked team or number two.
So what's the inside scoop? Who's flying the drone? Who put that in the air and started recording and watching?
The Canadians, man.
That's greasy. Against that team, though, like, I could see them doing it against, their big team. I don't know how big of a deal Canada is. They're a pretty goddamn good team, the women's team on the world stage, man. Like, that's kind of a big deal. So that's ugly that we get attached to that shit. Usually we're used to laughing at Russia and all their blatant cheating left, right, and center on the international stage. But that's kind of ugly that Canada gets in one there. But filming a practice with a drone, pretty stupid, but also like, I don't know, I could care less, to be honest. Doesn't bother
two drones, you're right. But looking forward to the Olympics, looking forward to the Four Nations coming up next February. We're going to see best on best action, and we'll see how many Maple Leafs play in that tourney. And that's going to do it for another week. Rosie, a Leafs morning take, as we alluded to, a couple of pretty decently large guests coming up next week. One will reveal, one you can wait on. Luke Schen's going to drop by on Tuesday, right?
I think so. Yeah, there's a few guys that might swing on by. So yeah, stay tuned and we'll let you know who they are when they get here.
They're calling Schenner like Scoopsy now in Nashville. Apparently he's got his finger on the pulse of like all the activity and all the movement. So we're going to actually get into the Stamkos situation and all that with Nashville had a big summer, man.
Crazy big. And yeah, after talking to Luke, he's laughing, going, man, I felt like I was like the main man for the National League. He's working the phones, and it's so Schenner, man. He loves to have the scoop. He loves to get in this guy's ear and shoot the shit. And what about this? And take this angle. And let me call this guy. Holy smokes. He's built to be a GM, and I think he probably will be one day, to be honest with you. But no, it sounded like he had his finger on the pulse of a lot of what was going on in Nashville this year, which was a lot.
I want to get, his thoughts on the future. Obviously, none of us are getting any younger. He's still playing the league, signed a multi-year deal, but his aspirations for the future, because I won't lie, my big proposal when Schenner retires is Leafs morning take with Nick Alberga, Jay Rosehill, and Luke Schenn. I think that'd be unreal.
We'll see. We'll see. I don't know if he's got, I don't know what that kid's going to do. He likes to get into it all, so I wouldn't put anything past him, but I think he will stay. Unless Jess, his wife, does not want to pack around anymore, unless she likes doing that. I don't know, but I could just see him in the front office so easily, Luke, and he's just a networking maniac. So I could see him in the front office.
You never know, but Luke Schen's going to drop by the podcast next week. The other thing I wanted to say too is like the NHL really lacks like a player podcast. Like I actually love that about other leagues, the NFL, the NBA specifically. Like something goes down in a game, the next day the player is talking about it on a podcast, and I think the Schenn brothers would be tremendous having their own podcast and just ripping on the game before when they play each other in the Central Division. So looking forward to Luke Schenn dropping by the podcast again. I think we have to get into the whole Mitch Marner conversation too, because there was rumors coming out of Nashville that Ryan O'Reilly, we've had on this podcast, was talking to management about getting Marner on the Predators. So we'll leave it at that, Rosie. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk next week, bud.
Sounds good, man. We'll catch up later.
There you have it. Jay Rosehill. I'm Nick Alberga. Thank you to everybody in the chat. You guys are phenomenal as we get closer and closer to 12.5 thousand subscribers. Hammer that subscribe button. Hit that like button at the Leafs Nation 401 Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Don't forget to visit LeafsNation.com. Thank you to producer Vic, and we'll talk on Tuesday. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews. We got clips. We got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.